On June 10, 2025, at exactly 6:22 p.m., Anthony Wainwright was executed by lethal injection inside Florida State Prison. Convicted of a brutal crime from 1994, he spent over 3 decades on death row. As the drugs flowed through his veins, his final words were inaudible, leaving the world to wonder what he really wanted to say. This is the chilling story behind his final moments. In the spring of 1994, a quiet Florida town became the center of national headlines after a crime that left the community shattered. It all began when 23-year-old Anthony Wainwright, a man with a troubled past, committed a crime so heinous it would define the rest of his life. Wainwright had stolen a car and fled North Carolina, heading south with no clear direction. By the time he reached Lake City, Florida, he was armed, desperate, and dangerous. On April 27th, in a supermarket parking lot, he spotted Donna Roberts, a devoted mother and nurse, loading groceries into her car. He forced her into the vehicle at gunpoint and made her drive away. What followed was a terrifying ordeal. Wainwright sexually assaulted Donna and later that same day shot her in the head and left her body in a shallow grave in Baker County. She was reported missing that evening, and a full-scale search began. Her car was found abandoned, and the community feared the worst. Just days later, Wainwright was arrested in Mississippi after being found asleep in another stolen car. Inside were Donna's credit cards and personal items. His fingerprints were everywhere, and a gun matching the murder weapon was recovered. Under interrogation, he confessed. His tone was flat, devoid of emotion. He explained what happened in chilling detail, admitting to everything. It was senseless, brutal, and impossible to understand. News of Donna's death devastated her family and sent shockwaves through Florida. She was remembered as kind, hard-working, and full of life. The public demanded justice. The governor promised swift legal action, and prosecutors vowed to seek the death penalty. Anthony Wainwright's name became infamous. His trial would draw intense attention, but no one doubted that he was guilty. The only question left was, how long would it take to carry out the sentence? The manhunt for Anthony Wainwright ended quickly. Within days of Donna's disappearance, tips from the public helped police locate him. Mississippi authorities found him at a truck stop, slumped behind the wheel of a stolen car. He was armed but didn't resist. His arrest was uneventful, but what came next would haunt many. Wainwright was returned to Florida under tight security. Detectives immediately began building their case. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA, fingerprints, and the victim's belongings all pointed to him. When he was questioned, he gave a full confession, describing the abduction, assault, and murder in disturbing detail. In court, prosecutors laid out the sequence of events. Donna Roberts had no connection to Wainwright. She was targeted simply because she was alone and vulnerable. It was a random act of violence. The jury saw a crime scene, photos, listened to testimony, and heard Wainwright's own words. His defense tried to argue mental instability. They described his troubled upbringing, substance abuse, and lack of support. But the prosecution reminded the jury of the facts. He planned the abduction, committed multiple felonies, and showed no remorse. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before delivering a unanimous guilty verdict. The judge handed down the death sentence. Donna's family wept in the courtroom. It was the justice they had waited for, but it would not heal the wound left behind. Anthony Wainwright's journey through the justice system didn't end with his conviction. It was just the beginning of a long stay on Florida's death row, a place of waiting, appeals, and isolation. For more than 30 years, Wainwright lived in a 6-by-9-foot cell. He was confined for 23 hours a day. He had no access to the outside world except for visits from attorneys and the occasional phone call. His days were monotonous, meals delivered through a slot, minimal interaction, and constant surveillance. He read, wrote letters, and filed appeals, each one aiming to delay the inevitable. He challenged his sentence on grounds ranging from ineffective counsel to claims of mental illness, but the courts consistently upheld his conviction. Meanwhile, the world changed. Outside the prison, technology advanced. Presidents came and went. and Donna's family aged, still carrying the weight of her absence. Every denied appeal was a reminder that justice was still in motion. Inmates around Wainwright came and went. Some died of illness, others were executed. He watched the system at work, year after year, but he rarely spoke. Guards described him as quiet, detached, and rarely emotional. He had no known visitors in the final years, no signs of reconciliation or regret. By 2025, the state of Florida had scheduled his execution. The appeals were exhausted. The date was set. After decades of waiting, the end had finally arrived. When Anthony Wainwright's final appeal was denied in early 2025, the governor of Florida signed his death warrant. The execution was scheduled for June 10th. The announcement made headlines. For Donna Roberts' family, it brought a mixture of relief and grief. The moment they had long awaited was finally near. Florida State Prison prepared the execution chamber. Wainwright was moved to the Death Watch cell, a special holding cell just feet away from where he would be put to death. He was placed under constant surveillance. In his final weeks, Wainwright received official briefings. He could choose a last meal, make a final statement, and request a spiritual advisor. He declined all of them. There were no visitors, no public declarations, no last-minute pleas for mercy. On the outside, public opinion was divided. Some saw the execution as overdue justice, others opposed the death penalty entirely. But for those who remembered Donna Roberts, the focus was on closure. The media prepared to cover the event. Reporters gathered statements from officials, protesters, and legal experts. The prison system rehearsed the procedure, ensuring everything would be handled by protocol. As the clock ticked closer to June 10th, Anthony Wainwright waited in silence. The justice system had run its course. On the morning of June 10th, 2025, Anthony Wainwright awoke in the Death Watch cell, just feet from Florida's execution chamber. The countdown had begun. He had spent nearly 31 years on death row, but this day was different. Guards monitored his every move. The chaplain checked in. His last meal was prepared. Wainwright had requested a standard tray. He didn't ask for anything special. Prison officials noted how calm he appeared, showing no signs of panic or fear. Throughout the day, he remained mostly quiet. He spoke briefly with the prison chaplain, but turned down a spiritual advisor. He didn't request to see any family. He didn't write any final letters. There was no statement of remorse, no plea for forgiveness, just silence. As evening approached, a small group gathered outside the prison. Some were there to protest the death penalty. Others came to support Donna, Roberts' family, who had waited decades for this moment. The execution chamber was prepared. Witnesses were led in, media representatives, officials, and a few members of Donna's family. The atmosphere was tense but still. At exactly 6:00 p.m., guards entered Wainwright's cell. He complied without resistance. Dressed in a simple prison uniform, he was strapped onto the gurney in the center of the chamber. IV lines were inserted into his arms. The drugs were ready. At 6:22 p.m., the warden gave the signal. The first drug intended to induce unconsciousness began to flow. Wainwright's chest rose slightly. He blinked a few times. Then came the second drug, which paralyzed the muscles. The third drug stopped his heart. According to witnesses, Wainwright's lips moved just before he lost consciousness, but no one could make out what he said. His final words, if any, remained a mystery. By 6:29 p.m., he was pronounced dead. Outside the chamber, Donna's family released a statement. This does not bring Donna back, but it ends a long, painful chapter in our lives. We hope she can finally rest in peace. There was no celebration, just quiet reflection. For many, the execution marked the end of a tragedy that began in a supermarket parking lot 3 decades earlier. For others, it raised deeper questions about justice, redemption, and the value of life, even after the worst crimes. One thing was clear. The story of Anthony Wainwright had come to an end. In the weeks following the execution, Florida returned to normal. But for those who had followed the case for decades, the echoes of what happened didn't fade easily. Donna Roberts' family tried to move forward. celebrating her memory in small, private ways. They visited her grave. They held a quiet vigil. They didn't speak much to the press. Across the country, commentators debated the ethics of capital punishment. Wainwright's case was cited by both sides, some pointing to the brutality of the crime as justification, others arguing the long wait diminished justice. Legal scholars noted how rare it was for executions to be carried out after such lengthy delays. Inside Florida's correctional system, little changed, but a few guards who had worked with Wainwright over the years described his execution as emotionally difficult. He was quiet, not violent, just waiting, one guard told a reporter, anonymously, and then he was gone. No one from Wainwright's family ever came forward to claim his body. He was buried in the prison cemetery, under a numbered marker. No headstone, no visitors, just a patch of grass that few would ever walk by. In the end, justice had been served, by the letter of the law, but the emotional scars remained. Donna Roberts' name became a symbol of random tragedy, of the slow grind of justice, and of a family's strength in the face of unimaginable pain. And Anthony Wainwright became a footnote in the long and complicated story of America's death penalty system, a man whose life ended not with a scream or defiance, but with an inaudible whisper no one could understand. As the prison gates closed behind the hearse that carried Anthony Wainwright's remains, the story seemed over. But death does not always erase questions. The files were archived, the cell cleaned out, and the world moved on. But that final moment, that inaudible whisper before the drugs took hold, lingered in the minds of those who witnessed it. Some believed he tried to say, "I'm sorry." Others swore it was "tell her," but no one knew who "her" was, or if he was speaking at all. The chaplain, the guards, even Donna's family, none could decipher the dying man's last words. The audio recording captured only faint static and the hum of the machines, silence broken only by mystery. What does a man think in his last seconds? Does he remember the face of the woman he killed? The choices he never made? The family he abandoned? Or is it something else? Something darker, deeper, buried beneath decades of denial? Some cases end with answers. Others end with questions that grow louder after the final chapter is written. This one ends with a whisper. But somewhere in Florida, a cold case detective reopened a different file from 1994, and the DNA inside bore a disturbing match. Could Anthony Wainwright have taken more secrets to his grave? Stay tuned.